back. It's Swing Pass. We've made the transition all the way to video now. We are caught up to the modern times. I am Adam Ruffner and joined, as always, by Daniel Cohen. Thank you guys so much for joining us. We're going to be trying to go through a little bit shorter, but a little bit punchier versions of these episodes. And for this week, we're going to be talking about the 2022 AUDL All-Star Game, where the East Central put down the Southwest team 42-24. The big, I think, central idea from this showcase, in addition to all the stars on display, were the 4 new rules. There was a 5-second stall. There was the addition of the 2-pointer. There was the move up of the pole 20 yards at the brick mark. And there was also a backcourt violation put into play. Now, all 4 of these rules took, I think, a good impact in this exhibition style format, particularly the 2-pointer. Now, you and I both lamented the 2-pointer going into this, and I feel like this showcase kind of confirmed our worries. The better team really just kind of ran away with it. The East Central All-Stars just connecting on so many deep looks, and it really, I think, put the talents of players like Max Shepard, Ben Yacht, Ryan Osgar on full display. And of course, the 2022 All-Star Game MVP, how could I forget, Abe Coffin.
Yes, he had a good game too. Yeah, that collection of guys right there, I think single-handedly ruined the 2-point rule for everyone. Like it's just not going to happen now. And it's that perfect recipe, right? You just have the big throwers and the big downfield receivers, or receiver in the case of Ben Yacht. And it's too much to overcome when the other team just doesn't have the same personnel. I mean, this East Central roster was constructed like specifically to take advantage of this 2-point rule. And I was a little surprised Southwest didn't answer with a few of their own. I mean, it seemed like they had big throwers just talent-wise, like Jake Radak, Kerr, Landro Marks. Like, they have guys that can put the disc deep. Really, it was Quinn Finer that had a lot of that like willingness to shoot deep, but I think on the other end, they just didn't have like a dominant force downfield like Ben Yacht. Or KPS also quietly had a very good game for East Central All-Stars, came down with a couple 2-pointers. Like, just having those big bodies back there, it's obviously super helpful, but Southwest could not keep pace at all.
Yeah, it just felt so much like a rhythm component, right? Like, we talk so much about teams getting into rhythm, offenses getting into sync, and with neither of these lineups really having any practice, you could just see the benefit of the East Central connecting on that first 2-pointer with Osgar looking deep, finding, I think it was, who was it? Oh, it was Brissett on the backside of that.
It was like trailing past Jeremy Hill.
Jeremy Hill did like the false jump and kind of drew the defender up perfect early. No, it was great. But from that moment, you could just see East Central get their footing underneath of them. They wanted to take that shot more. And on the flip side, you definitely had all that talent there. And I think you're right to point out Finer. He was so good for Colorado in his rookie season, connecting on that deep ball with other Summit teammates. But there just wasn't that oomph, right? There wasn't that sort of ignition. There was a couple nice Connor DeLuna plays early for Southwest. I thought he did a great job acquitting himself on the big stage, coming up with some great hustle plays. But as you kind of like elucidate, like when we think of the names from this game as to who stood out, it's just kind of a list of a lot of East Central players. Shepard, Yacht, KPS, Osgar.
They scored 40 plus. I mean,
Phil Turner had a great game. He had that great Callahan and got the shout out from Ben Yacht. And I think just showed himself to be a kind of a body that's always going to be a presence on the AUDL field. You know, his intelligence, his sense for how to read the field just shows up again and again and again when there's so many opportunities for jump balls, for plays in the end zone. He's going to make himself known.
Yeah, he played super well. I really, both offensively and defensively, had a few big blocks in the end zone. Obviously, that Callahan you mentioned. I love that one play where it was just like a floaty huck that went up from East Central, and then Phil Turner just comes in out of nowhere and skies everyone. I really enjoy guys seeing guys that are like high profile players on their teams that their teams might not get talked about a ton during the season. They can kind of get lost in the shuffle. Like Toronto, obviously there's sort of a rebuild happening there, but just seeing guys get on this stage and play with the best players from around the league, it's a cool reminder that there's really talent all across the league.
There was, I think, one stall early with the 5-second stall, and other than that,
I don't even remember it.
Really adjusted to it. I would have to go back and look, and I just feel like at the beginning there was a little bit more of a hecticness to the way teams set up with the idea of this 5-second stall. But despite the players sort of sounding winded at various points in the interviews and what have you, it really felt like there was a good adaptation to that kind of increase in pace of play. Like players really got the hang of it quickly, and that I thought it led to some pretty interesting interactions. I think it was kind of fogged over by how many 2-pointers there were and just sort of the excessiveness of taking that higher point integer for scoring. But I really want to see more implementation of the 5-second stall. I don't know if it's ready for full rollout yet, but I really stress, I think, the importance of increasing the pace of play. I think it's going to only lead to higher definitions on both offensive and defensive sides of the disc. I think you're going to see more offenses evolve into set plays, into kind of morphing offenses. And on the flip side, I think you're going to see more ability for defenses to kind of implement certain kinds of traps, throw different kinds of looks for a few seconds, and then devolve into something else. I just think you're going to see a lot more dynamics at play when you kind of keep reducing the amount of time people can just stand still with the disc, right?
Yeah, the 5-second stall, I really don't remember the stall that happened. To me, I wasn't even aware that the stall count changed. To me, it didn't affect the game at all. Yes, I think it sped up the pace of play, but I think the fact that I didn't notice it, I didn't notice any stall counts getting super high. I feel like players just adapted to it super well and pretty early on. I view this as sort of like a tease of what the 5-second stall could look like. It's hard because all these rules were combined in this format. I would still love to see 5-second stall in an isolated game where, there's not 2-pointers, there's not a backcourt violation, there's not short pulls. I think all of these together, we were trying to do things like make offense harder in some ways, but then the 2-point rule just kind of took over everything else. So I'm still eager to see the 5-second stall in a normal game setting without 2-pointers and without the other stuff, but definitely a good first impression for me, at least. I'm very high on the 5-second stall, and I continue to be.
So Abe Coffin comes away with the 2022 AUDL All-Star Game MVP trophy. He seemed like from the get-go one of those players who just finds his rhythm quicker than almost anyone on the field and just starts rolling and kind of gets everyone around him involved. But once again, Max Shepard in these All-Star games just sort of is the fire starter. It took a couple other people to, I think, get the ball rolling. But once that 2-pointer was in play, you could just tell Max is smashing the button to engage anyone deep on throws, and especially Ben Yat once that opportunity became available for him. Do you think that these sorts of high-octane games are some sort of catalyst for him playing at this level? Do you think that Pittsburgh just isn't in enough big games to really unlock this level of Shepard? Because even among 30 of the league's best stars, he just kind of always floats to the top 5 or so. And it feels like we've lost that the past couple of seasons, with the Thunderbirds only winning, 5 games since the start of 2021?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, I think that's right. I think he's just the perfect fit for this format, right? It was every time he touched the disc, he was fully aware that this 2-point rule was in effect and that he wanted to put on a show for the crowd. So he was just launching these backhands almost every time he got the disc. And I think knowing that this is the situation where he can shine in a variety of ways, I was surprised a little bit that he wasn't getting downfield a little bit more. But I think just with the personnel that they had on the team and the fact that he was so willing to launch those, and that was clearly the strategic advantage that East Central had, it just made sense for him to stay back more around the disc. It is like a thing with Pittsburgh where I don't think they're really in enough games for him to really shine consistently. I mean, in 2019 when he was an MVP finalist, like that was an incredible season for him, and obviously they won, what was it, 9 games that year, 8 games. And it was very much him and Thomas Edmonds running the show, and I think they still do that to an extent, but I think maybe the pieces around him have dropped off a little bit, and maybe the other Central Division teams have just continued kind of raising the bar, whereas Pittsburgh is just like, it's been the Max Shepard show for a few years, which, again, great in All-Star game format. I have no complaints at all, but, doesn't always translate to a, season-long journey for a specific team. But I love watching Max Shepard. I think him and Abe Coffin just, again, unlocked everything for this East Central team. Doing the game over without those two guys, here's a good question. It's a what if. Where do you think the score margin would have been had East Central not had Max Shepard and Abe Coffin? I don't know the exact numbers of how many 2-pointers they converted, but just think about the difference that those two made. I mean, they each had 6 assists, I believe, and a goal each. I don't know. Where do you think Southwest would have had a chance?
I think they would have had a chance, but, all due respect to Abe Coffin, all due respect to Max Shepard, they had incredible games. All due respect to the 2022 league MVP, Ryan Osgar, but it's his New York teammate, Ben Yacht, who, again and again, I can't get away from the fact that I think that guy's the best player in the league right now. The way he just takes over, the force of nature he is, the kind of gravity that just sort of surrounds him when he's on the field. When he's a receiver, he just pulls multiple defenders deep. And a lot of times it doesn't even matter. I mean, that's what Max Shepard figured out midway through this game. Oh, Ben Yacht's got a deep shot. If I just put it up on a shelf and it floats in front of him, that's just his to take, And he can affect the disc when he's in the play. He can affect drives when he's floating away from it. He'll just draw help. I don't know. He's just in that Shaq territory. I think we take Ben Yacht for granted. He won 2 straight MVPs, and while Osgar was absolutely deserving of taking it this year, there's no real reason to think that Ben Yacht has slipped at all from being at the absolute pinnacle of this league. And I think the All-Star game was a firm reminder of that. He got what he wanted whenever. And then he'd go to the sideline and chirp a bit about it. He's relaxed. He's in his zone. He posts to Instagram some hill routine workout where he's just blasting up and down like a 1/4-mile hill for hill sprints, because that's his trollish idea of a workout. But it's one of the hardest running workouts you can do. I mean, he's gotten to the point where he's just quietly going about his business, but his business is scoring 5 goals and putting up 500 receiving yards in the All-Star game. His business is subtly switching over to defense and being one of the most effective D-line players and two-way players in the sport. After
right there,
after a 3-year run of the best offensive seasons in league history from 2018 through 2021, and was again happening in 2022 before he went to D-line and lost a little bit of some of his top-end offensive performance. But still, he just puts up numbers. He just puts up numbers. He wins. He's chill now. I don't know. He just continues to, I think, impress me above all else, even on the largest stages, again and again. He's got 3 straight championship games now in the AUDL without a turnover. Just
pretty good. I think we could probably do an entire episode on Ben Yacht, and specifically Ian Toner's article from earlier this week, where he was looking at guys that shifted from offense to defense, those major coaching decisions, like Yacht and Abe Coffin, the other example. I have some thoughts.
I wanted to give one shout out, one other person that deserved to be in the article. And all due respect to Ian Toner. I know I'm throwing around a lot of all due respects here today. Maybe I'm being quasi offensive or something, or too backhanded. But Eric Taylor deserved a little shout out somewhere in that article for a two-way player.
By the way, I don't like what's happening with my blinds on my face. But,
I was having the
first video episode. We'll work out the kinks later.
We'll work it
my
out in
blinds will
post.
be closed.
Always in post.
Yeah, right. But let's I feel like we talked enough about Benya 2-pointers. The other couple rules we haven't discussed yet. One, I think the backcourt violation, from talking to players after the game, that was one that came up repeatedly as something that a lot of guys were on board with. I liked it a lot. I didn't think it changed things so much, but giving defenses just that extra little bit of advantage. Also seeing offenses kind of hesitate around that midfield line until they could kind of get a chunk game. Like they weren't going to just swing the disc like a yard past that line because then they know they can't go back, but sort of seeing how that factored into offensive strategy. I thought it was an interesting touch. And again, I'm all for making defense a little bit easier, offense harder. So I would like to see a backcourt violation stay. I'm a fan.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. I think I was running around that same night being like, we need to implement this in 2023. It feels like such an easy fix as opposed to stall 5. Obviously, that's a really radical change, I feel like. Whereas backcourt violation feels pretty mechanical. It feels like pretty easy to implement. I don't know. It just feels like one of those things that adds an extra wrinkle to offense just to think about, but in a way that doesn't really hamper any kind of flow or any kind of scoring opportunity. It just it makes the offense have to be that much more cognizant of what they're doing, because you could see as opposed to the stall 5 stuff where there was a couple times where players just had brain farts around the half court line and committed backcourt violations. And I think especially in high pressure, high leverage situations with the clock winding down and actually meaningful AUDL games, that's going to be a fantastic scenario. Like I can't wait to watch somebody in like a playoff game commit a backcourt violation in the fourth quarter.
Yeah. Also, just to clarify, I think there was a caveat in effect for people that are thinking like, okay, teams are just going to do these roller pulls where it goes out at the 49-yard line and then teams can't go backwards. I think if the backcourt violation was there, teams are allowed that first throw to go behind. Kind of like it's like an inbounds pass in basketball, right? Same concept. If you're inbounding it from in front of the backcourt line, you can throw it behind.
And there was talk of some other caveats as far as like if the roller pull doesn't actually cross midfield, then the offense gets to start on the opposing brick mark to really penalize teams from just doing roller pulls and trying to trap teams and kind of.
Because I mean that gets into the last rule, which we haven't discussed, was the moved up pulls. So there had to be something in place for that. The moved up pulls, I thought it was interesting because it kind of framed the game in almost like a. You liked him? Yeah. I think I liked him at the time, but then I was thinking more about it. And I still love just like the
where you get into trouble. Raw... You can't think about things. You just can't let it marinate. You gotta just.
I love the raw beauty of like just that 80-yard floaty disc for 10 seconds. I feel like there's just something really captivating about that within our unique sport, and that's sort of like the coolest showcase of a flying disc that you get all the time. So I like that. A lot of the pulls were just like kind of harsh blades, or I like the idea of pulls needing to be a little bit more precise, but I think overall I still like
hold on. You are so talking about this through the literal lens of your camera. Like you are thinking about
the aesthetic angle,
spinning around at 120 frames per second. Like I hear what you're saying. I totally understand. My rebuttal will be, I think you'll actually get more creative pulls from those same players, given that now they'll have to kind of change the trajectory of their throws. They talked about that on the broadcast at one point. And by the way, you can watch the entire 2022 All-Star game on watch.audl.tv. But at one point, the broadcast crew, was interviewing Abe Coffin, and he said he was taking off something like 40% on his pulling power to adjust to the move up in the pull. But I find that kind of fascinating because then you're talking about having to actually place the disc in bounds. You're not just torquing up and throwing as far as you can. You're actually having to, I think, be a little bit more precise in your placement. And I think that's really interesting. And I think the other part was you saw defense getting down so much faster. There was so much more coverage out the pull. There wasn't that immediate just like 20-yard centering pass gainer for the offense. It was like defense on top of you. Now you have to make that first throw decision. Otherwise, they might pick off a Callahan or something. Like I really liked that increase of pace of play right off of the pull, having the defense right down on top.
I like that too. I like the idea of like needing to be more precise, where you're like really trying to get that back corner. But I think on the flip side, by moving it up that much, and there's probably a happy medium. I think maybe like 10 yards outside the end zone is probably the way to go. This was at the brick mark, so that was 20 yards outside the end zone, which was pretty close. You kind of just, you make it so anyone can pull. So it kind of just like, you no longer have an advantage if you have a guy that can physically just launch the disc further than a lot of guys in the league, like Abe Coffin, Jeff Robinson. Like the good pullers are guys that can consistently plant the disc deep, and it kind of takes that away. It evens out the playing field in terms of a pulling standpoint, but it does make offense more consistently have to work that entire field. So I'm a little bit torn, aside from the aesthetic nature of a nice 12 plus million view Instagram reel of Abe Coffin's pull.
I know your heart's in the right place. I know your heart's in the right place, but I had to call out the bias there. I could just see you on the sideline.
That's totally fine.
Colors. Marquez
but no,
Brownlee,
it's like a new fan thing. Like someone goes to their first Ultimate game. I think the pull is like a pretty captivating thing. So I'm thinking about this just from a general pretty captivating, but perspective.
It's also kind of like taking someone to an NFL game and saying like, "Hey, you gotta watch the place kicker just bomb this kickoff."
No, not the place kicker. But if you saw a quarterback like launch a 60-yard throw, like that's cool. It's cool to see people do like impressive physical feats, and I think the pull is one of those.
Look, if they replace the kickoff with Mahomes just uncorking like a 70-yard rocket,
I'd be for that. That'd be fun.
That would be a lot cooler. That would be a lot.
Yeah. All right.
Speaking, that's actually a great way to end this, because speaking of NFL and AUDL, there will be a halftime exhibition this weekend at the Minnesota Vikings NFL game, where the New York Empire will be taking on the Minnesota Wind Chill. Wind Chill, of course, having played now, I think, every season since 2017. I think this will be their fifth.
Something like that. Maybe they missed the pandemic year. They maybe missed the pandemic year.
There was one wonky year, but every other year. Yeah, because there was the one year where they just straight up didn't have fans at the game. So why would they invite
it was
30-odd players onto the field? But every other year, the Minnesota Vikings have hosted a Minnesota Wind Chill halftime event. They've always been super great. I can't wait to now see this year's championship team. And I think it's going to be featuring like a lot of the stars and starters for the Empire, and like Ben Yacht. I think Ryan Oscar is going to be there.
The Minnesota guys. Boys. They're homecoming.
Yep. I imagine Charles Weinberg too. So that should be a pretty good event. Looking forward to that. I don't know if the teams have any plans to live stream it at all, but it's always kind of dicey with how these NFL teams operate with their field specificities and qualifications and whatever else. But there will for sure be media coming out. Empire having just actually already played in an NFL halftime event at the New York Giants game, not this past Sunday, but the Sunday before that, before the Thanksgiving holiday. But just so I catch everyone up, in addition to that, there has been two contractures in the league. Tampa Bay and the Ottawa Outlaws are no longer in the AUDL going into 2023. And there will be an expansion Houston team in the South Division added for the 2023 season. So there will be a lot of news to cover in coming weeks.
News and notes.
We are still catching up on it ourselves. So that's why we're just teasing it for now. But we hope you will join us as we continue to pioneer a new video podcasting format here on Swing Pass. We'll be back next week, hopefully on Wednesday. We apologize for the little bit of delay in getting this episode up, but as you can see, we're changing. So we hope you stick around as we continue to change and grow going forward. We always appreciate you listening in. We'll see you soon. Peace.